Hello and welcome to Legal View with Michael Ayala. Thank you so much for joining me today. I just wanted to jump on and get some information out to you. So much happening in the news today. First and foremost, just want to touch on this idea that Brian Kohberger did an interview with the New York Times and proclaimed his absolute innocence, says he's not guilty of the crime, wants to vacate his plea at this point, says he was given disinformation and he wouldn't have taken the plea if he had known all of the information. I'm not going to go into that today. Judge Ashley Wilcott and I are going to address that whole thing and take you through all the legalities and legal framework having to do with his decision or his apparent or stated decision to get rid of that plea. Not an easy thing. Good luck, Mr. Kohberger, because remember, he was convicted in the deaths of those four co-eds in Idaho. 4 life sentences, and he took that deal in order to take the death penalty off the table. And he was asked in court, do you understand what you're doing? Yes, sir. Did anybody coerce you into doing this? No, sir. He's asked a series of questions that are meant to protect against this kind of thing. And also, when you do a plea deal, you waive your right to appeal. So as far as appeals are concerned, he doesn't have that route. There are things called post-conviction relief that he can go after. But this is a steep, steep hill to climb. And we'll take you through that tomorrow on In Session with Judge Ashley Wilcott and Michael Ayala. Today, I wanted to talk about that video. It's just so intriguing, making its way around the internet involving the Nolan Wells case. An audio engineer allegedly got a hold of that 911 tape from a call made by the boys on the day, July 4th, calling for a tow. They called the C-Tow company, but apparently some law enforcement folks got involved, and that's who this tape belonged to. And they needed a tow because the boat was taking on water. So it was an emergency call. Hey, can you come get us? What's interesting about that call is if you listen to it just normally, that's all you hear. You hear the young man asking for a tow, the dispatcher asking questions, trying to figure out how they can get this done. But apparently an audio engineer claims to have split the tracks, cleared up one of the tracks, and really cleared up what you can hear in the background. I'm not an audio engineer. I make no claim as to whether you can even do that. Everything I've read and heard suggests that is absolutely possible, but there are limitations to it. There are things that happen when you mess around with the frequencies and split tracks and et cetera, that it can make words sound like things that they're actually not. So I make no claim to the accuracy of what this person is claiming, to the skills of the audio engineer who did this, but it raises some very serious questions, and I want to talk about that today. But first, let me play the audio for you. Take a listen.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our village pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Oh, shut the fuck up!
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, so let me put up what you can hear. It wasn't terribly clear, so I apologize for that. But I do have here, this was transcribed from that video. Apparently, this is what this person felt they heard. I heard some of this. I can't say I heard all of it, but certainly I heard some of it. It says, can we cover it up? Yeah, I thought all about that. And again, we're not sure exactly who's saying these things. You can hear maybe some are female voices clearly. Others are male voices. They haven't put names to those things. You killed him. He's already dead. Is he dead? Yeah. Somebody yells, Nolan. Oh my God, you can hear that. You'd even heard that in the tape that I played for you. Then someone says, Nolan, wake up. Something inaudible. Then somebody yells, Wyatt. Then someone's yelling, wake up, get TF up. Okay, Bart, Nono's really dead now. That is chilling. That is incredibly chilling. If that's what you're actually hearing on this tape, that is chilling. That is incredibly damning. Where are we in this investigation? If that's in fact on the tape, one has to wonder if this investigation has uncovered this at this point. And there are some serious implications for this information making it out into the public. Apparently, it made its way into the public because of a Freedom of Information Act request by a local news station, NBC, locally there, put in a request. Whenever there's public records, things like 911 calls, a number of different things, the public has a right to know those things. Those are, in fact, public records. TV stations, individuals, they can put in what they call a Freedom of Information Act request. And there are people specifically assigned with this duty to handle those requests. And you can ask for that information. And apparently that's how this information was released. So it slipped through the cracks. And here it is, it's out there. And internet sleuths are something else. And again, I don't know how accurate this is, but there's clearly two tracks. And this takes me back to this prosecution. At this point, and I want to play some sound for you from Angela Myers from the other day. I've got a couple things that I want to play for you. Take a listen.
I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation and the grand jury proceeding. As your district attorney, I have an ethical obligation to avoid public statements that could influence witnesses, prejudice a proceeding, or compromise the fairness of the legal process.
Now, those are all noble purposes. No question about it. And she's absolutely right. She's talking about what the statutory construction in Mississippi says she should not do. But it is not a blanket mandate that she can't. There are things she can release. There are things she can say that will not have that effect, that will not affect the integrity of the investigation, prejudice witnesses, prejudice folks who might be suspects in the case. Now, in this instance, for instance, one of the things that they can do, DAs, investigators, is they can make statements to counter false information in the public. This particular tape has been out now for maybe 2 days. I think today, late last night, was the first time I really heard the audio engineer. She had posted something, I believe it's a female, posted something last night saying she was working on it and she'd have something shortly. I saw it this morning. What the prosecutor can do under the statutory construction in Mississippi is correct misinformation. This is so devastating. This is the perfect example when you want to come out and say something if you know that a mistake has been made. If a mistake hasn't been made, how are people supposed to have confidence in what you're doing if they're hearing things that suggest people in the case have lied, which, if in fact what we're hearing is what is actually on that tape, well, then the witnesses have lied. They say they left Nolan Wells at the aisle and left without him. According to this tape, if you believe what you hear, and if it's reliable, and I want to keep putting that caveat out there, he's on that boat, and something's wrong with him. People are wondering if he's dead. Don't know what happened to him, don't know how we got into that situation, but if it is, that is the situation, then the people lied. We've seen so many cases where you may not have evidence that someone did something, but something happened, so you got to start putting pressure on people. You got to bring them in, you got to charge them. This is a perfect example where you use lying to the police as a charge to put pressure on people to tell what really happened. Now, we know the FBI has been involved in this. They certainly have the capabilities. Mississippi State investigators are involved in this. They certainly have the capabilities to do this. Would they, or did they even think about doing it? And again, this goes back to what we've been talking about in terms of the seriousness of this investigation. The questions, how deep are you going? Are you getting subpoenas for all of their phones? Are you checking all kinds of social media? In her statement, she does say that FBI, local authorities, state authorities are working around the clock on the case. What are they doing? And I'm glad to hear that, because that's what this case requires. That's what this family requires. That's what this family deserves. But you have to ask the question, what good is it if from the beginning it wasn't treated this way? We've had this issue from the very beginning, and what caused a lot of the issues we're seeing with the Nolan Wells case is this idea that the local investigators, when they first found the body, within a couple of hours had basically made the claim that it was an accidental drowning and that there was no signs of foul play. Okay, fair enough, no signs of foul play. But within that 2-hour period, what happened? What physical evidence was collected? Did you treat it as if something had happened? A young man washing up on shore should cause red flags to go up. Just calling it an accidental drowning raised a lot of flags for people, saying that maybe this case, because of the racial dynamics, might not get the attention it deserves. And certainly when you see local investigators saying right off the bat that this was an accidental drowning, you got to ask questions. Because who made that determination? Did you get an ME down there or someone from the ME's office to look at the situation, do an evaluation, and determine that within 2 hours? Did you do your post-mortem investigation as the law requires in order to make that determination within those 2 hours? It seems unlikely. Public trust is eroded. And that's what sparked a lot of these problems. And if you miss that opportunity, if you're not treating it as something suspicious, protocols say you have to protect the scene, protect the body, collect evidence from the body, collect evidence from the scene. And it lays out some specific evidence, but also just a general sort of investigative workup on the body. Get under the fingernails, you get some blood, you get you do a temperature, you do all kinds of things, and you scour the area for any kind of evidence. And you quickly do your interviews surrounding it, and then you get to the boat, you get other places, and you collect evidence from there as well. So if that's not done properly, what difference does it make if they're working 24 hours a day now? Right? Because the most important part of the investigation was not done the way it was supposed to be done. So it helps. And it's a good thing that they're working as hard as they are. But the fact that we don't know that initial investigation, how diligent they were at that point, could certainly affect the outcome of this case. And I've said many times, I've told you, presenting cases to the grand jury is only as good as the information you have and the information that's presented by the prosecutor. You can indict a ham sandwich in a grand jury. That's the popular saying. And you cannot indict one. You can choose what you present. It's a secret proceeding. And those transcripts, etc., those are secret. You're not going to know what went down. And that might be one of the reasons that they decide to take cases to the grand jury. Here's something she said during that statement she made last week about the grand jury, which I found surprising.
Every death in the county, except those of natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, are presented to your grand jury. Many people don't know that.
That's interesting. That is not something that happens in most jurisdictions around this country. Now, what would be the reason for that? Why would she decide that that was the route to go? Because that is not a legal mandate. That's not something that's mandated by law in Mississippi. That is a policy within that county DA's office. It's a lot of resources. There could be a lot of reasons cases don't get taken to the grand jury. No reason to think there's criminal activity. Usually you'll have your investigators go out if you think, it needs to be investigated. And if they come back with enough information, you make the assessment as the district attorney and say, I'm going to take this to the grand jury because I think there might have been a crime committed here. And I have evidence of a crime and evidence of someone who might have committed that crime. That's when you take it to the grand jury. Do you have, in fact, that probable cause to then charge that specific person? Now, I get it. There's reasons, right? If you invoke the grand jury, which is what they do apparently to every case, there are powers that go along with that can be helpful in an investigation automatically. And these were questions I had earlier about not classifying the death as suspicious or criminal investigation under Mississippi law. That kicks in some of these powers. But apparently they don't need to do that because every case is going to the grand jury, so these powers kick in anyway. So that, again, good news. Good news, because I was wondering, are they using subpoena power? Because if it's not being considered suspicious, statutory construction in Mississippi doesn't necessarily allow for subpoena power, things of that nature, which is what you need in an investigation like this. So subpoena power automatically kicks in. The secrecy aspect kicks in. It's important for them, right? The investigative flexibility. And the other thing that it gives them is the appearance of neutrality. Prosecutors like, in certain situations, to have the option of taking it to the grand jury and letting the citizens of the community decide. So then it can't come back on them politically that they were the ones that decided not to press charges in this case. No, we took it to the grand jury, folks. The grand jury was the one that looked at this and said there wasn't enough evidence to bring charges. So will this prosecutor take to the microphone again? Because this is explosive. And there's a lot of people, Nancy Grace, for instance, who are on this case now, who jumped all over this tape. And everyone's got the caveat, we don't know how accurate it is. And again, as I say, frequency modulation and all that stuff, from what I read, I am not an expert by any sense of the word in terms of audio, could affect how words are heard and what you actually hear or what's actually said can differ. But if they've done these testing and if they found that this is an error, would this not be the time to get in front of a microphone and say, that information is incorrect? You don't need to tell us what the correct information is if you don't want to. But what you're hearing is incorrect. We've done what was done. We've got our experts on it. And we've come to a different conclusion as to what's on that tape. Again, I'm not sure that will quell the public at this point because it's kind of late. But they need to get out in front of this stuff. So in conclusion, I think it's time for prosecutors' offices to start rethinking, especially in these jurisdictions, the further south you get, they're used to this power and control over these processes. And just like Judge Roach thought he could in the Carmelo Anthony case, control it, didn't feel the need to feed the beast. I'm going to control the information because the only thing is when it goes out there, it's just going to be misinterpreted anyway. In this case, we're not going to release any information. We want to protect the integrity of the prosecution. Not so sure that's the right way to go. But I think they need to start rethinking that, especially in these high-profile cases. And as far as this audio tape goes, it remains a bit of a mystery. It is incredibly damning. I know my heart skipped a beat when I heard this. If it is what it appears to be, whoa. There's a lot of people who are going to face some very serious situations. Are there going to be charges brought for lying to police? Because the statements that at least we understand were given did not include Nolan ever being on that boat. Will this result in some form of charges regarding what happened to Nolan Wells? Did the body actually show some form of reason for his death? Did the toxicology, I don't know if it's back yet, but did it show maybe it was a result of a drug that might have been given to him or he took himself? Highly questionable based on what we're hearing from the father. He was set to go off and begin training and was not drinking or doing drugs at that point. Don't even know if he did drugs on a regular basis anyway. Did something happen to him? Is that red mark on the back of his head indicative of something? Accident? Did he fall and hit his head with a pushing and shoving match? Did something happen to his throat? The throat was held back for the second autopsy. Did they find something there? Is that why they held on to it? They were continuing their investigation. They were continuing to look at it. That would have been protocol. At least that's according to the medical examiner in DC who did the second private autopsy, said it's not uncommon if you want to take a second look at something or continue to look at something that might contain information that could be useful in determining cause of death, you hold on to it. It certainly prevented the second autopsy from coming to any conclusions if you don't have the lungs and stomach and the throat. Sending over the body in that position, it's like, what's the point? It doesn't feel transparent because you've guaranteed by holding back certain things that that second autopsy was going to be inconclusive. You don't want them to jump the gun? Well, you let them know. Don't jump the gun. If you get information, you're going to hold it until we agree when we release this information that's in the best interest of justice. I don't know. It all remains a mystery. Very, very, very disturbing mystery. An awful, awful tragedy that happened. People are invoking race. People are invoking secrecy. We just want to know what happened. And the sooner we can find out what happened, the sooner we can get information, I think the sooner the speculation will die down and people will move on to another story. But we'll have to wait and see. I want to thank you so much for joining me here on Legal View. Don't forget, tomorrow I'm going to have In Session with Judge Ashley Wilcott. We'll be releasing that later in the day. We're going to be covering the Lindsay Clancy case that's going on in Massachusetts. A woman is charged with the murder of her 3 children. They say she did it because she's just an evil mother. She claims insanity. Really interesting legal framework for insanity in Massachusetts. So Judge and I will talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about this case and this situation with this tape, kind of dig into that a little bit more, get a little deeper into the legal framework, because again, that's what we do. We try to differentiate ourselves from folks out there. We're not about throwing breaking news out there or shock value. We're about giving you the legal framework and to understand what's going on, try to help you understand why it's happening and what's going to happen next and what it all kind of means within that legal framework. And then we'll get deep into that Brian Kohberger situation. We'll tell you all about what he's claiming there and what he's facing going forward if he wants to get that guilty plea to those 4 murders vacated and end up basically going to trial, because if in fact he does that, he's not getting another plea. He's going to trial and the death penalty will be on the table. And trust me, it's not coming off the table. So he better be careful what he wishes for under these circumstances. The evidence we saw in that preliminary hearing seemed pretty damning, although I will say, we've said it all along, it was very circumstantial. They didn't have anything specific forensically to link him, but they had eyewitnesses who gave descriptions. I won't go into it here, but Judge and I are going to dig into that tomorrow. So be sure to join us on In Session tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me here on Legal View today. And please like, subscribe. And if you have the opportunity, love to get your paid subscription, because again, love bringing this to you, but it's not easy and it's not free. All right. Have a great day.